In this section, I'm going to talk about questioning what we think we know and whether we can be sure that what we think we know is in fact true. One of the things that I have found most useful, in addition to listening to what I'm telling myself inside my own head, is to question what I think I know and whether it's true or not. There's a couple of areas of questioning that need to be looked at. One of them is certainty. How certain can I be that this information or this idea is in fact true? Where did I get this information from? Are the sources of that information credible or not? Where did they get that information from if it's a third party? Was it through first-hand experience? If it was through a third party, where did they get that information? From a book? From other people in their lives? Is it just something that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation? And does that automatically make it true? Or should it be questioned for accuracy and whether it's something that needs to go forward as though it's truth? If some authority figure said that this is so, who were they? Was it some clergy person? Some religious figure? Your parents? A teacher? A government official? That doesn't necessarily make it true. It just makes it information that they are passing on. And where did they get that information? How credible is their source? One of the most important factors I looked at is, if I believe this is to be true, is there any substance for it? Is there any demonstrable proof that it is in fact true? Or does it require faith, or requiring a belief that it's so, whether or not we can see it, or feel it, or measure it? First-hand experience tends to be a little more concrete because it's something you actually experience, but oddly enough, that's one of the first things that people tend to discount when they have conflicting information from outside sources or their own personal experience. You would think that having a first-hand experience would be something that would be the go-to, be-all, end-all source for this is real, but that's not necessarily the case. Frequently, things that we've experienced, we can be convinced not to believe by other people in our lives. Authority figures, parents, families, friends. If they don't believe that that's true or could be true, then it makes us question whether we were crazy or did we really experience that or not. If there's a question, then it becomes less certain. Another thing I look at is how willing to consider new information are the people passing on this information to me. How certain are they that their belief is absolute? If they can look at that same belief in the light of new information or new experiences, then there may be more credibility in my mind. That doesn't mean that that's true. It's just I feel that if you're not willing to look at new information and see how that correlates with what you already believe to be true, then you may not have a very certain belief. The truth doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. It still is demonstrably true. So if you're not willing to look at new information that might counter that belief, then I would question how solidly you're sure that your idea is right. Especially in things religious, I frequently run into a total lack of willingness to consider other perspectives, other belief systems, or new information in light of what they profess to believe. And I also see that a lot of religions are based on old books that have been interpreted many, many times throughout many, many years, and I would consider that there is the error possibility present, that distortions may have crept in over time, or that there is a bias being delivered repeatedly through various vested interest in having that be so. That would be another area to look at when you're considering the sources of your information. Whoever's telling you that this is so, do they have some investment, some personal stake in it being true, or having you believe that it's true? If there's some motivation other than just passing along information, you may want to look at that source of information and find out, is this really true? Or is it just something they want me to believe is true? In the internet age, we have access to lots and lots of information that historically has not been available, but you also don't know the source of a lot of that information. You don't know whether there's truth behind it or not, or whether it's just a biased point of view. Again, check your sources of information. Then there's a factor of knowingness. We know that the sun rises and sets. We know that the moon comes up. We know that the seasons are going to change. These are things that are repeatable, demonstrable, and can be measured. That would constitute something that is known. In science, if it can't be measured, tested, repeated, it's not something that's considered truth. For a lot of people, the measures of science don't hold a lot of credibility. They would rather believe what their pastor tells them about how the earth was created rather than things that can be demonstrated. Humans have the ability to detect truth on an intuitive level. When I hear something new, does it feel right? Does it sound right? Does my intuition say, yes, this is truth? If it does, then I'm going to look at it a little closer. If it does not, if it just comes across as so much gibberish, then I'm not necessarily going to consider it true. Another interesting factor is that when people have personal first-hand experiences, they may or may not consider that to be credible. In fact, frequently humans will turn down their own first-hand experience in favor of what other people say is possible or can be experienced, or their interpretations of what they saw. They may actually see something, but be convinced by other people, oh, you couldn't possibly have seen that, that's not real. That doesn't make it any less real, but it does open up the possibility of, did I really hear that? Did I really see that? Am I sure what it was I perceived? If we can be caused to question what we ourselves have experienced, that puts information from other people in a higher category than our own first-hand experience, and that may or may not be a very good thing to do. I also like to look at not just who stands to benefit from me believing any given thing is so, but how stubborn are they about considering new information or new ideas? How open to question are they? If somebody gets very upset when you question their beliefs or their positions, then they may or may not be very solid, and they may not have a whole lot of confidence in it, because usually when somebody's got confidence that what their position is in fact valid and so, then they can take the questions, they can look at different perspectives, and they'll be a little more open to examining those beliefs in the light of new information. Beliefs are a lot like computer programs. They need to be updated. They need to be based on current information. And if you're not willing to change your opinions or your ideas or your beliefs based on new information, new experiences, and new ideas, then you may very well be in a very stuck position that is not going to be very beneficial for you. For me, when somebody is stuck and unwilling to look at new information or new ideas, or just even consider that their position may be wrong, is a giveaway that this may or may not be something worth taking too terribly seriously. I think that new ideas do deserve to be examined and looked at objectively, and evaluated to see if there may be truth, if it's something that needs to be incorporated, or adjust the perceptions and beliefs based on this new information. Some of this difference in whether you're willing to look at a new idea or not can be based on fundamental differences in the way humans function. There are underlying biological differences between those that would call themselves conservatives and those that would call themselves liberal or progressive. Conservatives tend to see the past as being the gold standard, and they want to go back to what they believe was true in the past, or to hold to what is and what they know as being the best. They resist change. They resist new information. This is not necessarily a bad thing, because it does provide balance to the opposite side, which is the liberal or progressive, where change is good and There's always new information to be had, new beliefs to look at, new things to do. With humans, it takes all the different expressions to make the whole. People don't need to be locked into being one way or the other and never changing, never adjusting. It's a good idea to evaluate the beliefs that you're holding dearly, the thoughts periodically, because they may or may not be based on truth, and they may need to be updated. Thoughts and beliefs are a lot like computer programs and do need to be updated. And thoughts and beliefs have a great deal of influence on individual people and on a mass level. When you have large groups of people believing the same thing, that would be called a culture. And in any given activity that humans are capable of doing, in some culture or the other, and under some set of circumstances, any given action, including murder, are considered right and good by that group under those set of circumstances. It's all relative in that respect. For example, killing your offspring for honor of the family is considered right and good in some cultures. Other cultures, any kind of harm of a child by a parent is considered a completely unthinkable act. Killing people in a war is also considered good and right. The government kills people for having committed crimes. That's also considered good and right. But at the same time, we know that killing others is not a good thing to be doing. Again, for any given action that humans are capable of doing, under some set of circumstances and in some culture, that very same action is considered good and right. Another thing to look at when you're evaluating ideas or beliefs or information is, what is the best use of the available resources that is promoted by this idea? Does this idea support positive outcomes for the majority, or does it only benefit a limited few? And if so, who are those limited few? Religion and politics have a whole lot to do with what's considered the best use of resources and whether any given action or belief system is right and good, and consequently has been a huge source of conflict and environmental destruction and human destruction over time. So you take a look at the priorities of those promoting the ideas. What resources are being allocated to it? Can it be demonstrably true? And finally, the last thing is it going to matter in the long term? If we are still going to hold the same thing true 10 years from now, then it's worth looking at. But if it's just a passing idea, a passing fancy, then there's not necessarily a need to go all out in believing it and putting huge amounts of energy into it. Again, it's a time perspective. How long has this idea been held to be true? Does it mean that it's still true today, just as it was when it was initially promoted as the idea? Some ideas gain acceptance over time. Things that we didn't know were possible when we were children are suddenly now not just possible, but daily, everyday events. Just because an idea has been believed for a very long time doesn't necessarily make it valid or true. So you really need to look at these ideas that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation, especially if they haven't been examined by yourself for accuracy and whether it's something you wish to embrace. So, questioning what we think we know is a very important activity to do. It keeps us really current with what we believe and why we believe it, and whether or not it is in fact true. And having an open enough mind to be able to question and really evaluate the ideas and beliefs that you hold is one of the most important steps for personal growth.